You're watching MHS. Sit back, sub, and enjoy scary stories.
I'm 45 years old, a former psychology lecturer at the University of Michigan. My old job led me to spend years researching abnormal psychological behaviors. After taking early retirement, I kept the habit of lurking in online forums, places where I believe the human psyche's most clearly revealed. Last year, I started paying attention to an account named The Humble King on Reddit. Initially, what he wrote sounded harmless, even somewhat humble. But years of working with models of emotional manipulation made it impossible for me to look away from what he was sharing. He always started every conversation with lines like, "I know I'm nothing compared to you guys," or "I guess I'm not capable of doing that." I know I'm nothing compared to the talented people out there, but at least I know my limits. Maybe that's why I don't fail. But I noticed something was wrong. This wasn't genuine humility. This was a form of subtle manipulation. He was fishing for denial, waiting for someone to say, "No, you're really good." Every post followed the same pattern: fake self-deprecation, followed by waiting for community validation. A few weeks later, his tone changed. He began bragging about how he relieved stress, sending toxic comments to young entrepreneurs, up-and-coming artists, anyone pursuing a dream on social media. He justified that he was helping them, warning them early because new ventures always have major risks and will fail anyway. When someone objected, his defense collapsed. He suddenly admitted brazenly, "Yeah, I like pulling people down. I can't stand people who are confident for no reason." To prove he was different from the other users on the forum, he started boasting. He worked for a major company everyone envied, had a beautiful girlfriend, unlike those who only lived in the virtual world. A few other members, and I suspected he was lying, but no one had proof. Then one day, he left a final line before deleting his account. "I'm better than all of you." 2 months of silence passed. I had almost forgotten about him until a new account appeared. It wouldn't have been worth mentioning if the writing style hadn't been so familiar. He shared about real-life actions that made him feel superior, such as yelling at convenience store employees, causing scenes at restaurants, filing baseless complaints just to see them panic. He wrote that it felt amazing to see them tremble. They don't fight back. They apologize with their heads down. Just shout a few sentences, and you'll see them shaking like students in front of the chalkboard. It's truly cathartic. A few weeks later, local news in Michigan spread across the forum. A series of assaults targeting a group of high school girls had occurred. The perpetrator repeatedly physically assaulted, pushing, grabbing, pulling the girls, and then ran away, and all victims reported that he laughed loudly and yelled the same phrase, "I'm better than all of you." The community began to boil. His old posts were dug up, spreading across the forum at lightning speed. People compared his writing style, tone, and language, then matched them with the descriptions from the news report. The pieces were starting to fit together in a chilling way. I can't believe it. I followed him from his first posts. I even defended him when others called him negative. A few longtime users spoke up. They affirmed, "This is the humble king. Honestly, I used to laugh when he crushed someone's dreams with cold, hard data. I thought it was just brutal honesty. Now I realize I was cheering for a psychopath." Then someone said, "We need to call the police." When the police released the suspect's photo on the news, I felt that what I had imagined earlier was exactly accurate to a chilling degree. It was a skinny, small man, wearing thick glasses, with a pale face. The police confirmed he was unemployed and lived alone in a small apartment. No big company or girlfriend. Everything he had bragged about was a lie. I breathed a sigh of relief. Justice had been served. But the sentence stunned me. 6 months suspended. The reason was that the high school girls only suffered minor injuries, and he was deemed to have a psychological disorder that required treatment rather than incarceration. I read the news report over and over. 6 months suspended for behavior that was publicly foreshadowed by an escalation of violence online. That sentence was absurd. It was evidence of the system's failure to identify a threat from the online world. A year later, just as I was preparing to forget the whole story, another article appeared. This time it was no longer local news. It spread nationwide. A man had broken into a kindergarten in suburban Michigan, attacking teachers and parents, all women. A young female teacher died at the hospital due to head trauma. Security guards who subdued the attacker testified that he kept screaming, even while being held down on the floor. "I'm better than all of you." A few hours later on the Reddit forum, a mysterious new post appeared and vanished after just a few minutes. Content. "I'm better than all of you. I just did what everyone secretly thinks but doesn't dare to do. The world needs to be set right." I looked at the suspect's photo on the screen and immediately recognized him, the humble king. That skinny face, those eyes behind thick glasses, staring straight into the camera lens with defiance. After reflecting on all his actions, I can confirm he wasn't an online troll looking for attention. He was a narcissistic personality escalating his violence, from toxic comments to assault, and finally, murder. He didn't want recognition. He wanted fear. He wanted to prove he was superior to everyone. I turned off my computer and sat in silence. The thing that haunts me most isn't what he did, but the fact that, even though I saw the clear signs, I still couldn't prevent the tragedy from happening. I once called it emotional manipulation, suspected the bragging, and recognized the growing hatred. I read those words with the eye of a researcher, someone who had taught about abnormal behavior, and I was still just a person sitting in front of a screen, observing, analyzing, and then remaining silent. I was right about him, but it meant nothing without action. Now, every time I browse the forums, I no longer read casually. I look closer at every post. I ask myself, how many more, like the humble king, are still lurking in the crowd? How many warnings are missed? How many people are still watching without intervening? I am Sarah, 29 years old, and living in Seattle, Washington. People often joke that this city is built on rain and coffee. For me, coffee is a lingering obsession. 3 years ago, a terrifying experience forever stole my dream of opening a coffee shop. To prepare for that dream, after completing my barista certification, I took a part-time job at a nearby Starbucks store. My working group included Emily and Jason. We called each other partners. Mark, the store manager, only appeared briefly at the beginning of the shift and at the end of the day for financial reconciliation. For the rest of the time, we managed on our own. The first days were truly wonderful. I was fascinated by learning to use the machine, memorizing syrups and basic recipes. However, the joy was quickly eroded by an uncomfortable feeling from my colleague, Jason. He was a man of few words, always wearing baggy jackets. He never joined in on the jokes. His face was like a plaster statue with very little expression. The most frightening thing was his eyes. I often caught his gaze secretly watching me from behind the bar or through the reflection in the mirror above the espresso machine. It was a scrutinizing look, as if he were calculating something. I tried to ignore it, telling myself I was being overly sensitive. Once, Emily even joked casually, "I bet Jason has a crush on you." I didn't know what to say. My forced smile reflected the anxiety in my heart. I had wanted to set clear boundaries, but out of politeness and fear of complicating the work environment, I chose silence and avoidance. One afternoon, as I was cleaning the espresso machine, Jason approached. He placed a hot cup of coffee down. "New recipe, try it and give me your feedback," he said in an even voice, his eyes fixed on me. Trying new recipes was normal, and I always felt excited about anything related to brewing. I picked up the cup. The light steam carried a faint, pleasant aroma, but something felt slightly strange. I took a small sip. The unusual taste spread in my mouth, making me slightly grimace. It was bitter, more so than usual, with a pungent metallic aftertaste. Finally, my tongue felt a slightly viscous residue lingering. "What do you think?" Jason asked, his eyes still locked on mine. I forced myself to swallow. I didn't know what to say, just mumbled an awkward comment that the flavor was quite unique. Jason said nothing more. He just stood there watching me for a moment, subtly curved his lips in a satisfied smile, and then turned and walked away. I didn't take another sip. A moment later, I needed to use the restroom. As I reached for the paper, I suddenly paused. Behind the toilet paper dispenser, something was hastily stuffed in. I gently pulled it out. It was a close-up photo of me working, clearly a candid secret shot. Before I could even figure out why my picture was there, my eyes were glued to a horrifying detail. Right on my face in the photo was a streak of a cloudy white substance, which had dried. I froze. The air around me felt thick. Disgust surged, but it was accompanied by a terrible recognized fear. Every discomfort, every lurking gaze was now sickeningly confirmed. Jason was stalking me. He was using my photo to satisfy a perversion, and it was happening right where we worked. From that moment, I tried to avoid Jason as much as possible. I didn't dare report him because I had no concrete proof. I didn't want to mess up my job, so I decided to endure and adapt. And then the fateful night shift came. Jason handed me another cup of coffee and said it was another special version, his eyes again showing clear anticipation. I couldn't refuse, so I took a small sip. This time the bitterness was extremely unpleasant. It was even more fishy and viscous than the last time. I managed to swallow it down, grimacing, and reluctantly gave my feedback. Jason grinned widely, his eyes showing pleasure as if he were savoring something. I looked at Jason in confusion, then unintentionally glanced down. I was horrified to realize that his zipper was not completely pulled up. In that moment, time seemed to stop. All the disgusting pieces, the lurking eyes, the soiled photo, the viscous, fishy taste in the coffee, snapped together into an undeniable truth. I was certain Jason had put his bodily fluid into the coffee cup. Not just once, but twice. Disgust and horror overwhelmed me. I stood there, unable to scream, unable to move. Just as I was paralyzed by the extreme shock, the coffee shop door suddenly opened. Emily appeared. She had forgotten her wallet and came back to retrieve it. Without thinking for another second, I immediately rushed over, grabbed Emily's arm, and dragged her straight out of the shop. I sobbed hysterically, trying to recount the entire incident. Everything happened quickly after that. Manager Mark was reported to immediately, and the police were called right away. Jason was arrested that very night. He still maintained a cold, indifferent demeanor. I remained submerged in a shock I couldn't escape. Jason was prosecuted for perverted conduct and endangerment. Despite it being his first offense, he received a 6-month jail sentence. I felt the sentence was far too short, but what haunts me most is that he will be released again. I quit my job immediately afterward. To this day, I'm still psychologically damaged by what happened. I cannot take a sip of Americano. The bitter smell of coffee always brings back the disgusting, viscous, and fishy feeling on my tongue. And my dream of opening a coffee shop, it vanished forever since that night.
I'm Karen, 18. Just moved into the dorms at Franklin College. a small, chill school in Ohio. Since arriving late, I didn't have a lot of choices for a room. I ended up with a room on the top floor, which is pretty annoying for getting around. The hallway was dark, the windows were busted, and the wind blew through, making creepy noises. Even though I felt weird right from the start, I told myself it was all in my head and everything would be fine. When I opened the door, I saw JC, a classmate who had been here earlier. JC was quiet and had something kind of weird about her. There were crosses hanging all over the room, and the lights were always on, even during the day. Every night, JC would play music and curl up on the bed, her face always looking tense and scared. Her random gasps and jumps in the middle of the night made it almost impossible for me to get any sleep those first few days. I was so exhausted. I went to the dorm office to ask for a room change, but they were all full. With no other option, I decided to stick it out and figure out a way to deal with it. I decided to start a conversation, telling some funny stories to try and get JC out of her shell. At first she was quiet, but over time, we started getting closer. One Saturday night, while we were sitting on the floor eating pizza, JC finally opened up. She said that since moving into this room, she's been hearing a girl sobbing and whispering in a sad way. There were nights when loud banging noises came from the wall, but she couldn't figure out where they were coming from. JC thought this room had some creepy secret, and that fear made her unable to sleep without the lights and music on. Listening to her story, I got the chills and tried to tell myself that JC was just overthinking it. But after that day, everything started to change. The weird stuff JC told me about, I started feeling it too. One night, while JC was asleep, I was lying in bed and heard a soft knocking sound from the wall across from me. The knocking was steady, getting louder and louder, like someone was trying to break out. I jumped up, my heart racing and my whole body freezing. I shook JC awake, but when she opened her eyes, everything went silent. We just sat there, frozen under the light, with a creepy feeling filling the whole room. A few days later, while cleaning, I accidentally found a weird object stuck in the crack of the old cabinet. It was a dusty student ID with the name Tabby Nelson on it. In the photo, Tabby was this pretty girl with long brown hair and a big smile. When I read the info on the card, I realized Tabby was a student at the school, like 7 years older than us. That night, JC and I sat in front of our laptops looking up info about Tabby in the school system. The results shocked us both. Tabby Nelson had dropped out before even finishing her freshman year. There was no note, just the reason: sudden transfer. JC didn't stop. She kept searching through old news sites. Suddenly, JC stopped, her eyes wide, voice shaking as she read an article. Tabby Nelson went missing from her dorm. I just stared at the screen, reading those words. Almost 10 years ago, Tabby was last seen heading back to her room late at night. The police searched everywhere but didn't find a thing. What made me shiver even more was that the room Tabby had been in was ours now. I felt cold all over. The weird sounds JC heard, the crying and the knocking, it could have been Tabby Nelson. I tried to come up with a reasonable explanation, but I couldn't. This room wasn't just old and forgotten. It had a creepy story buried in it for years. Since that day, neither JC nor I could sleep. The knocking got louder and clearer, with whispers and sometimes soft sobs mixed in. One time, when I was lying down to sleep, JC suddenly shook me awake, her face pale. "Karen, there are footsteps on this ceiling." We both froze, holding our breath. The footsteps dragged slowly, then just stopped right above our heads. The next day, we decided to look into it more seriously After asking some seniors a few times, we heard rumors about what happened to Tabby. Some people whispered that Tabby had been taken by the dorm manager himself. They said Tabby had found out something she wasn't supposed to know, and to shut her up, the manager tried to get rid of her. After that, no one ever saw Tabby again. The room she'd stayed in was locked up right after and stayed empty for years. But because so many students were coming in this year, the school had to reopen the old rooms. That night, JC and I decided to do something crazy. Search for evidence inside the room. We grabbed flashlights and checked every corner of the room to see if anything was missing. When JC pulled out the bookcase, she shined the light on it and found an old wooden box. When we opened it, there was a diary inside with the name Tabby Nelson on it. JC and I opened the diary. Tabby's shaky handwriting told a terrifying story. He was always watching me, the dorm manager. He threatened me when I found out he was using girls for some terrible stuff. I didn't dare tell anyone. He said if I said anything, I'd disappear forever. If anyone finds this book, please tell the truth. I don't want to be forgotten. I put the book down, my hands shaking. JC hugged me and started crying. The next morning, we took the diary to the police. A few days later, the news spread like wildfire through the school. The police searched the dorm again and found a secret underground bunker. There, they found the remains of a young girl, later identified as Tabby Nelson. The dorm manager was arrested shortly after. He confessed to the crime. He killed Tabby to silence her after she found out he was abusing and threatening the girls. The whole school was shocked, unable to believe that such a horrible secret had been hidden for so many years. The last night before moving out of the dorm, I dreamed of Tabby. She stood in the dim light, her long hair loose, a gentle smile on her face. This time, she wasn't crying anymore. When I woke up, I felt a weight lift off my heart. Finally, the truth came out, and Tabby Nelson would no longer be a ghost lurking in the walls.
I'm Otis, and I've worked the night shift at Walmart for 3 years. I still remember that one work evening. It was drizzling, and the air was chilly. Otis, you'll handle the electronics aisle in aisle C today, okay? Susan, the night shift manager, said as I walked in. Yeah, no problem, I replied, even though I honestly hated that area. Aisle C was in the furthest corner of the store, usually deserted at night, and the security cameras didn't cover all the angles. That night, Kyle, the security guard, had called in sick with a sudden high fever. By around 1 a.m., the store was almost silent. I was feeling sleepy and decided to go make some coffee. That's when I saw him for the first time. A tall, middle-aged man, wearing a black coat that went down to his knees, even though it was quite warm inside the store. The dark blue backpack on his back looked strangely bulging. He stood at the end of the aisle, staring straight at me, sending a chill down my spine. I tried to ignore him and continued working. As I walked past the shelves in the tablet section, I felt a presence behind me. Hello, can I help you with anything? I asked, trying to keep my voice professional. The man didn't answer right away. He tilted his head, as if studying me. Could you show me these phones? He pointed to the glass display case showing the high-end phone models. I took out the keys to open the case, even though I felt uneasy. Handing him a phone, I noticed his hands were pale with small scars running along his fingers. How long have you worked here? About 3 years. Do you like working here? It's all right. Do you often work the night shift? Alone? He continued, his eyes fixed on me. We always have a few people working each shift. He chuckled. Of course. Safety first, right? He gave the phone back. Could you give me your phone number? In case I have more questions about the products. My heart beat faster. I'm sorry, but that's personal information. You can call the store's general line. I handed him a business card. His smile vanished, and he turned and walked away. I sighed in relief, but the uneasy feeling lingered. About an hour later, while I was organizing the DVD section, I felt someone watching me again. Turning around, I saw him standing at the end of the aisle, still with the backpack. I decided to go find a colleague. "Mike, there's a weird guy who keeps following me. Could you help me keep an eye on him?" "What guy?" "I don't see anyone." I turned back. The man had disappeared. He was just there, wearing a black coat, carrying a blue backpack. Mike shrugged. "Maybe he left." "Don't worry too much, Otis." I went back to my area, this time carrying a box cutter in my pocket. The clock struck 3 a.m. It was my break, and I went to make coffee. The break room door suddenly opened. It was him. "Hello again, Otis." He read my name from my tag. "What a coincidence meeting you here." "This area is for employees only," I said, my hand reaching into my pocket. He closed the door behind him and slowly took off his backpack, placing it on the table. "I want to show you what I brought." I didn't wait any longer. With a quick move, I pushed him aside and ran out of the room. "Susan!" I yelled when I saw the manager at the checkout counter. "There's a man following me. He went into the employee break room." Susan looked at me skeptically. "Calm down, Otis." "What man?" "Wearing a black coat, carrying a blue backpack. He was asking me personal questions." Susan called Mike on the radio, and we checked the break room together. There was no sign of the man or the backpack. "Maybe you were just spooked," Susan said. "He was real," I insisted. "Hey, relax," Mike patted my shoulder. "Maybe he was just some weirdo." I started to doubt myself. Maybe I had overreacted. "I'll check the security cameras," Susan said. "But get back to work for now." The rest of the shift passed tensely. When it ended at 7 a.m., Susan called me into the office. "I checked the cameras, and there's no man wearing a black coat in any of your footage during your shift." "That's impossible," I protested. "He was there. I talked to him." Susan sighed. "Maybe you saw someone, and your tired mind filled in the details. Or maybe the cameras didn't catch him. Anyway, I need you back tonight. We're short-staffed." I went home in a state of panic. Despite my fear, I went back to Walmart that night. I needed the job, and I wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't paranoid. Susan greeted me with a forced smile while Mike avoided eye contact. "Otis, you'll be working in the stockroom tonight. We need inventory done." I nodded, relieved that I wouldn't have to face aisle C. After working for 2 hours, I realized I had forgotten my phone in my locker. As I walked through the dimly lit employee hallway, I heard Susan and Mike's voices from the camera surveillance room. "Can't keep this up. He saw the man. The thing with Kyle will come out." Susan's voice was strained. The name Kyle flashed through my mind like lightning. Kyle, the security guard who had called in sick because of... Tonight, when he's in the stockroom, lock the doors. Activate the fire suppression system. No one will know he's in there, Susan whispered. My body went rigid. Fragments of memories suddenly flashed. Blood on the floor, a blue backpack, a body being dragged away, and me witnessing it all. Now I remembered. The night Kyle disappeared, I had seen Susan, Mike, and 2 men in black dragging a heavy black bag out the back door. I had seen blood, and they had seen me. The next day, I remembered nothing, only a splitting headache. So who was that mysterious man? Was he trying to warn me? I sneaked to the employee entrance, punching in the code with trembling fingers. I sped back to my apartment, frantically throwing clothes, cash, and documents into a backpack. As I turned to leave, I jumped at a figure in the darkness of my living room. "Don't be afraid, Otis," a familiar voice said. The mysterious man stepped into the light. "I've been watching you to make sure you're safe." "Who are you?" I asked, clutching my car keys like a weapon. "My name is Evan, an undercover FBI agent." He presented a badge. "Kyle Moore was my partner. He infiltrated Walmart to investigate a criminal network, but he was discovered. What were you going to show me? Evidence of Kyle's death and their operation. This Walmart is just a front for a drug smuggling ring across the Mexican border. Susan and Mike are key players. Why haven't you arrested them? We need to know who's at the top. Kyle was close to the truth before they found him. Suddenly, police sirens wailed in the distance. They reported you, Evan said. Said you attacked a colleague and stole merchandise. What do we do now? I have a plan, Evan said, opening the blue backpack. Inside were recording equipment, a micro camera, and a hard drive. But I need you to be brave one last time. 2 weeks later, major news outlets reported a massive bust at a Walmart store on the outskirts of town. A multi-million-dollar drug smuggling ring had been dismantled, with Susan, Mike, and 17 others arrested, including the regional director of the supermarket chain. At FBI headquarters, I looked down at the Citizen's Bravery Medal I had just received, still not believing what had happened. I had learned that trusting yourself is more important than anything, especially when everyone around you tries to make you doubt yourself. And sometimes the strangest person in the room might be the only one you can trust. I'm Merlin. I live alone in an old apartment complex in the suburbs where winter always brings boredom and bone-chilling cold. I am completely dependent on the bus. I can't drive because of a maxophobia, fear of driving, and mild social anxiety that developed after a horrifying incident in college. I always try to separate myself, withdrawing into my own world, undisturbed. That day, I was huddled in the last double seat of the public bus on my way home, listening to music loudly on my headphones. Then, a middle-aged woman boarded the bus. She was bundled up tightly in a faded navy blue puffy coat and a woolen scarf wrapped around her face. Her face was almost completely obscured, but her deep, dark eyes were constantly searching. She walked straight to the back of the bus and stopped, staring intently at me. A chill ran down my spine. I instinctively reached up and took one earbud out. She was carrying something in a worn baby carrier. At first glance, I thought it was a sleeping child. But then, when the bus braked lightly, she shifted, and I saw it. It wasn't a baby. It was a reborn doll, the kind made to look exactly like a real infant. The silicone skin was pale, and the wispy hair looked fragile. Its eyes were empty and lifeless. As I tried to look away, she uttered a cold whisper. Her voice was raspy. "You should listen to your mother, young man. Take those out." Her words stunned me. Before I could react, she sat down in the empty seat next to me, her shoulder bumping hard against mine. She leaned her head close to me and began to mumble, whispering disjointed phrases about sacrifice, the one who must pay, and the driver who didn't stop. I couldn't catch everything, but those words clearly didn't sound normal. I sat motionless, clutching my backpack, paralyzed by fear and guilt. I pulled the cord and decided to get off the bus 2 blocks before my apartment, right in a deserted industrial area. The moment my feet left the bus steps, I ran headlong into a nearby dark alley, holding my breath, waiting for the bus carrying the terrifying woman to disappear completely. I sighed with relief, assuring myself that I had escaped that mobile nightmare. But the moment I reached my ground floor apartment, as soon as I stepped inside, I froze. The woman holding the doll was standing right at my living room window. I distinctly remembered closing the blinds tightly before I left. I didn't have time to think. Fear completely overwhelmed my reason. I ran into the house, locked all the deadbolts, and used a heavy wooden chair to barricade the doorknob. I burrowed under the covers and eventually fell asleep in a state of extreme terror. The next morning, I left my apartment in a state of high anxiety. I glanced around the yard, the parking lot, the windows. There was no sign of her. In the daylight, the fear subsided into doubt. I began to wonder if I had really seen her, or if strained nerves had played tricks on my mind. I tried to reassure myself. The story was over. She was just an eccentric woman on the bus, and my imagination did the rest. However, the moment the bus stopped for me that afternoon, all my reassurances shattered. The woman was standing menacingly at the bus stop, the exact stop where I had gotten off the night before. She didn't approach, she just stood and watched, but that action said everything. She was waiting for me. I no longer dared to walk leisurely. I hurried straight back to my apartment, only wishing to lock myself within 4 safe walls again. As soon as I slammed the door shut, I leaned against it, panting. And then, the apartment doorbell started ringing. A long, continuous chime, relentlessly. In utter panic, I locked the door and texted Ben, my best friend, for help. I could only type short, breathless words. A crazy woman is harassing me. She's right outside the door. I saw Ben read the message, but he didn't reply. A few minutes later, I received a text from him. I'm outside now. Hey, you're disturbing the peace. Ben's firm and strong voice rang out from outside. This is harassment. The woman became enraged, turning her furious wrath toward Ben and demanding to see me, yelling, "Give me back my child. Don't hide him." Ben replied coldly, "The police are on their way. You have 2 minutes to leave." The woman angrily walked away, but not without uttering a threat in her hoarse voice that echoed down the hallway. "You'll pay. Both of you." After the woman left, Ben suggested we go for a walk in the park a few blocks away to get some fresh air. But as we passed a thick bush, she appeared again. The woman lunged toward us from a nearby shrub, screaming in agonizing pain, her hand reaching out to me. "Stop! Don't take him away!" She pointed at me fiercely. We didn't understand what was happening, quickly running back to the apartment. We agreed to only call 911 if she actually broke in or caused property damage. Everything until now, though worrisome, hadn't crossed the legal line. Ben said, "She needs psychological help, but we need to be safe first." The next day, Ben decided to execute a bold plan. He wanted to create an undeniable situation. He deliberately walked to the end of the street, pretending to text on his phone, provoking and distracting the woman who was loitering nearby. The moment she lunged, Ben called 911, clearly describing the harassment and the threat. Ben didn't run inside but kept her outside, repeatedly stating, "She is threatening me. She is physically attacking me." The woman, in her rage, turned back and tried to break down the door of my apartment. The banging this time was not just relentless. It was physical destruction, undeniable evidence. Just a few minutes later, police sirens wailed. She was arrested by a precinct officer for harassment and disturbing the public peace. A few hours later, the officer called me, explaining the woman had lost her real son years ago in a traffic accident and suffered from severe psychosis. Afterward, a middle-aged man knocked on my door. It was the woman's younger brother. He said the family had been searching for her and wanted to apologize. I remember every word the man said to me. She used to be a wonderful mother until the accident took the baby. She lives every day with the feeling of losing her child. The accident happened on a rainy evening, right on the highway near the gas station nearby. The boy was hit and lay motionless by the side of the road. The police never found the hit-and-run driver. I listened, unable to speak. My heart felt like it stopped. Every detail the man described felt too real to me. That evening, I sat alone in the living room. I remembered that night years ago, when I was a sophomore in college. On a pouring rainy evening, I ran a red light on the highway near the roadside gas station. Everything happened in seconds when a small figure darted across my headlights. I didn't stop. I immediately drove away. Afterward, I always told myself, the kid must be okay. It was just a slight bump. I never looked into it further. never followed the news. I didn't check any reports. No police ever came looking for me. I have lived with that quiet anxiety for years, isolating myself, leading to my fear of driving and social anxiety. I couldn't tell anyone about it. I wanted to bury that memory, but it wouldn't let me go. I hadn't been found, but that woman had found me. The punishment I had avoided returned, not through the law, but in the form of a deranged mother and a lifeless doll. I'm Hannah, and me and my 3 friends, Alex, Mia, and Jared, had this idea to go camping for the weekend. We picked a remote spot out in the Mojave Desert, close to the Nevada border. Alex found it on some camping forum where people couldn't stop raving about how wild and beautiful it was, especially the night sky. We got there around 4 in the afternoon and decided to set up our tents on this little hill that looked out over a sandy valley. There wasn't a soul around. No lights, just cactus, rocks, and sand stretching out forever. We pitched our tents, made some food, and sat around the fire telling ghost stories and cracking up, just like we always do on these trips. By the time it hit 10 p.m., everyone had had a couple beers and was getting ready to crash. That's when I noticed this tiny light way off in the distance. At first, I thought it was just a shooting star, but then I looked again and realized it was headlights. Out in the middle of this endless desert, any sign of life was a big deal. I pointed it out to the others. Mia grabbed her binoculars from her backpack and checked it out, said it looked like a big truck pulling a trailer. Jared just shrugged and went, probably locals or something, no biggie. But something about it felt off. I mean, who drives way out here this late at night? Just as I was about to say something, a bright red light shot up into the sky. It lit up the darkness like fireworks. Alex was like, could be a distress signal or something. We all looked at each other, freaked, but mostly curious. Alex stood up, brushed the sand off his pants, and was like, let's go check it out. Honestly, we should have been crawling into our sleeping bags, but instead, we grabbed flashlights, our phones, and Jared's bush knife, and headed off toward the light, buzzing with that dumb but thrilling excitement. We hiked for like 20 minutes through some rough ground, scrambling over rocks, dodging cacti. As we got closer to the light, we came across this small campsite, just a couple of military-style tents, a dead fire, and some folding chairs scattered around. But no one was there. Alex picked up a can of soda and said whoever was here must have just left. It was still warm. Mia noticed tire tracks and a bunch of footprints in the sand, all leading off in the same direction. I crouched down and saw something glinting under my flashlight. It was a shiny brass bullet casing. Looked brand new. Mia's voice got tense. She said maybe we should just head back. But right then, another flash lit up the sky, closer this time, and way brighter. That same red glow lit up a trail leading into a narrow canyon. My heart was racing, but I couldn't shake the urge to see what was going on. I told the others we'd just check it out real quick and turn back after. We followed the trail, kept quiet, and even turned off our flashlights so we wouldn't get noticed. The canyon opened up into this small valley, totally boxed in by stone cliffs. And what we saw there, I swear I'll never forget it. In the middle of the valley, around 20 people were standing in a perfect circle around a big fire. They were all wearing these long black cloaks with their hoods up, completely still like statues. Right in the center of the circle, over the fire, was this huge black metal pyramid, probably 4 meters tall. Even from pretty far away, we could hear this deep, steady sound, like some kind of humming. It was weird and haunting. Then out of nowhere, everyone went totally silent. One person stepped into the middle of the circle and faced the pyramid. They were holding a long knife. We couldn't really see what was happening in the circle, but it got real tense. Then suddenly, the person yelled something, like a spell, and the whole valley echoed with it. Mia let out a gasp, totally freaked out, and Jared immediately motioned for us to stay quiet, but it was too late. We could see the faces in the circle now, and every single one of them was staring right at us. Jared shouted, and we all bolted like our lives depended on it. Behind us, we could hear shouting, screams, footsteps, getting closer. My heart was pounding like crazy, my vision tunneling. The ground was rough, and I tripped a couple times, but adrenaline kicked in, and I just kept pushing forward. As we passed the abandoned campsite, a bunch of red flares suddenly shot up from the hills around us. The whole desert lit up in this eerie red glow. Then we heard voices shouting from every direction. Alex froze for a second, realizing there were way more of them than we thought. Mia started crying. We knew we were surrounded. Jared was gripping the knife tight, eyes darting around in a panic, and said that as soon as we got back to the tents, we had to jump in the car and get the hell out of there. So we kept running. All we could hear was our hearts pounding and our own breath, ragged and sharp in the cold air. After probably 15 minutes, we finally saw our camp up ahead. We made a beeline for the car, dove in, and Alex jammed the key into the ignition. But when he turned it, the engine just gave out a loud, hopeless hum, then died. Alex kept trying, turning it over again and again, but nothing. I looked out the window, and that's when I saw red flares all around us, closing in. Figures, slowly walking toward us from every direction. Calm, like they knew we weren't going anywhere. Jared yelled for us to call 911. I started digging around for my phone, but no signal. That's when it hit me. We were out in the middle of nowhere. Mia suddenly pointed up at the sky, catching all of our attention. The moon, just moments ago, big and bright, was slowly turning blood red. It was a lunar eclipse, but right then, it felt like some kind of death omen. Jared yelled that we needed to make a run for the main road, but just as we threw open the door and stepped out, a voice rang out behind us. I turned around, and there he was, the guy with the ceremonial knife. He was only a few steps away. The fire from the pyramid lit up his face. It was cold, bone-chilling. I turned to Alex next to me, and my blood ran cold when I saw the look in his eyes. There wasn't any fear. Instead, this creepy smile started creeping across his face. Alex looked at us and said he was sorry, said this was the only way, that the pyramid needed new energy, and that we'd been chosen. And in that moment, it all made sense. Why he'd been so insistent on this campsite, why he'd acted weird but still agreed to go, why he was so dead set on driving, even though Jared always drove on trips like this. They knew we'd see the flares. They knew we'd follow. It was a setup, and we walked right into it. Then I suddenly remembered I had pepper spray in my backpack. My dad gave it to me before the trip. Just in case, he said. No hesitation. I dove into the back seat, grabbed my backpack, and yanked out the spray. I shouted, "Alex!" He turned, and I blasted him right in the face. He screamed, let go of the wheel, hands flying up to cover his eyes. I didn't stop. I just kept spraying like crazy at the cloaked figures coming toward us, turning the air into this cloud of burning fog. While Alex was still writhing in pain, I grabbed the keys from his hand, shoved him out of the way, and jumped behind the wheel. Jared, without a word, knew exactly what I was about to do. Jared didn't hesitate. He shoved Alex out of the car. I screamed, jammed the key into the ignition, and cranked it hard. The engine roared to life. Turns out the car wasn't broken. It was just Alex messing with us, trying to stall. I slammed the gas pedal down, and the car shot forward, straight at the cloaked figures standing in our way. They scattered, diving out of the way, some hitting the dirt hard. In the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of Alex, standing frozen in the middle of the desert. His face was twisted in rage, his hands still covering his eyes. The car tore down the dirt road, leaving behind the flares, the firelight, and the screams that faded into the distance. Jared didn't say a word. He was just breathing hard, eyes locked on the road ahead. I didn't say anything either, just kept both hands on the wheel, trying to keep us steady over the bumps and turns. Mia was curled up in the back, still in shock, sobbing without a sound. We finally hit the main road, but I didn't slow down. I just kept driving, straight through the night, until the lights of the first town came into view. After that, we never talked about Alex or those cloaked figures. It was like we'd all silently agreed that they didn't make it out of that desert. I am Ben, 30 years old, a freelancer who survives on small online gigs. I still remember that horrifying job clearly. In the bitter, skin-cutting cold of December in Michigan, I was staring in despair at my nearly empty bank account, trying to scrape together enough to pay rent for my shabby apartment. Craigslist became my last refuge, a maze of false hopes and ridiculous odd jobs. Then I saw it, a strange little job listing tucked between ads for used furniture and roommate searches. The title was vague, but the pay was incredibly tempting. It was a part-time job offer from a man who called himself Victor. The task sounded harmless, even absurd. Find locations with the right kind of energy to install guardian angel statues. But what stopped me from hesitating was the pay. $1,000 for every successful placement contract, plus 1% of the profit afterward. I felt like I'd just hit the jackpot. I accepted immediately. After traveling to where I'd be working, I realized it was an isolated retirement community on the outskirts of town, built in the 70s. The streets were so clean it was unsettling, lined with old wooden houses, lying silent under the frosty haze, with almost no young people in sight. Victor welcomed me into a shabby rental apartment. He was a man in his 50s, thin, dressed far too formally, a turtleneck wool coat and gold-rimmed glasses that made him look more like a disgraced scholar than a businessman. His eyes were sharp and fixed on me in a way that felt intrusive and uncomfortable. Victor laid out 3 mandatory conditions for any house eligible for statue installation, and they confused me because they made no sense. 1. It has to be a detached house. 2. The house must be at least 30 years old. 3. Only 1 or 2 elderly people can be living there. When I asked about the purpose of these criteria, Victor said that security in the area had worsened due to crimes like theft and break-ins, and that the cause was a disruption in the geomagnetic flow, his term. Installing the statues was meant to stabilize the geomagnetic currents because the area was experiencing a rise in crime. I didn't believe this mystical explanation, but when I looked at my empty bank account, I told myself, this is just a harmless, legal job, some silly little scam to help sell statues. Right after moving into the temporary apartment in the community, I truly began to feel the isolation and eerie stillness of this retirement neighborhood. The air was heavy, and it felt like I was surrounded only by old people and old houses. That stillness quickly turned into unease. Late at night, while I was resting, I heard a strange sound. It sounded human, but not clearly. I've never believed in ghosts. I've always thought dealing with people was far scarier. I recorded the sound. After replaying and analyzing it, I could clearly hear a man's voice repeating the words, "Stop, stop." I quietly opened my door and saw a shadow dart away into the darkness. I tried to reassure myself that it was just some mischievous teenagers. I quickly found success in the job. In less than a week, I had signed 8 contracts and earned $8,000. Victor continued sending me requests, now with a new condition. After each installation, I had to provide full information about the residents, names, ages, health conditions if known, and daily habits, e.g., early sleeper, frequently away. When I asked why, he simply said it was to verify the statue's protective effectiveness, since it relates to personal energy. I felt a bit uneasy but didn't question it much. After all, these were just elderly folks living alone, nothing to hide. During one of my scouting trips, I stopped by Steven's house. It perfectly matched the installation criteria, and I pitched the offer to him. Stevens immediately reacted harshly, even shouting directly in my face, "Stop! Get out of this town!" His tone when he said "stop" was identical to the voice I had recorded. I realized Stevens was the one who had been following me. His attitude and tone clearly showed displeasure with my work. Perhaps he suspected I was some kind of con artist. I left thinking everything was still fine. Sometimes you just meet difficult clients. I couldn't get Stevens, but there were plenty of other houses to approach. Then things started to go wrong. The first news I saw was a burglary in the neighborhood. An elderly woman's home had been torn apart by an intruder while she slept. A few days later, another one, then a third. All of them were in areas I had recently visited. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, but then one case made me freeze. That house was one of the locations where I had installed a statue just days earlier. I opened the map, marked all the places I had visited, and was horrified to realize that most of the recent burglaries overlapped with locations of the guardian angel statues. Curiosity turned into panic. I began connecting everything: the installation conditions, old houses, usually with loose windows or easy entry, elderly residents with little ability to resist, and especially the habit tracking information. The purpose wasn't to stabilize energy. It was to determine exact targets and the safest times to strike. I was horrified when I realized Victor's true plan. The guardian angel statues were simply markers for houses to be robbed next. I had become the scout helping them execute their cruel scheme. While I was still reeling from this revelation, I suddenly received a $3,000 bank transfer with the note "Profit Share." That money, though large, became a crushing weight on my conscience. It was no longer legitimate pay. It was dirty money, a percentage of profit earned from the fear of frail, elderly people. I stared at my phone screen, feeling no different from an accomplice, even if unintentionally. I immediately froze my bank account, determined not to touch that money. The guilt pushed me to take action. I returned to one of the houses to photograph a guardian angel statue that had been damaged during a recent burglary, hoping to gather evidence. As I carefully stepped across the cluttered yard, a horrifying sight stopped me cold. The statue's eyes were wet and black, not from dirt or mold, but from a dark, viscous liquid streaming down from its stone eye sockets, as if the statue were truly crying. A chill raced down my spine. I didn't dare touch it, and an eerie spiritual thought intruded on my mind. The guardian angel cannot bear the crimes it has been forced to witness. I suspected this wasn't merely a physical substance. It was a supernatural omen of the crimes I had helped enable. I decided to cooperate with the police, handing over all documentation about Victor, including notes and maps of installation sites. He was arrested soon afterward, and the chain of crimes came to an end. But his fate was more horrifying than any legal punishment. A few days later, I saw news that Victor had committed suicide while in custody. My hands trembled as I read the details. The way he did it horrified everyone. Victor had tried to kill himself by stabbing his own eyes with a pen. My whole body shook, ice cold. I remembered the black tears streaming from the statue's eyes. The curse of the angel had taken the eyes of the man who had defiled it, I told myself. Victor's act of destroying his own eyes was a direct and terrifying reflection of the guardian angel crying black tears from being exploited. The guardian angel had punished the wicked in the most horrifying way. Although I wasn't arrested, the police severely reprimanded me for my irresponsibility. I immediately shut down all my bank accounts. I used the entire $11,000 I had earned from Victor to compensate every victim whose homes I had unknowingly marked. It was the only way to ease my guilt and end that dark chapter. I accepted the cold, suspicious stares from Stevens and the other residents. I knew I had no right to ask for trust or forgiveness anytime soon. I had faced my own guilt and learned a bitter truth. Chasing easy money had turned me into part of a crime. Easy money always comes with a price far higher than any contract. Winter in Michigan grew colder, and I decided to leave the town, abandoning the temporary apartment. I promised myself I would be more careful, that I would only earn money in honest ways. That is my story, and it happened 4 years ago. I learned a costly lesson, but more importantly, I escaped the spiral of crime and the curse.
I never thought my chill life would one day take such a terrifying turn. It was this gloomy fall day. My parents were out at some conference, and I was home alone, way out near the woods. That evening, I swung by the closest gas station after hanging out at my best friend's place. The dim neon lights made the place feel creepy. There was a guy standing by the gas station while I was filling up my car, his face hidden under a low baseball cap. He had on a bulky, dull brown coat, and I could feel his eyes on me the whole time. As I snapped the gas cap shut, the guy walked up and asked how to get to the interstate. His voice was low, not really threatening, but definitely not friendly either. I gave him directions, being polite but quick about it. As I turned to head out, a chill ran down my spine. Driving home, I noticed a car behind me, its headlights way closer than usual. At first, I figured it was just another car going the same way, but every time I sped up or slowed down, it kept the same exact distance. When I turned onto the dirt road toward home, the car suddenly stopped and its headlights went out. I glanced in the rearview mirror, but all I could see was darkness swallowing everything up. I tried telling myself I was just being paranoid, but the feeling wouldn't go away. That night, in the quiet house, I heard this soft voice, like a whisper on the breeze, calling my name from outside the window. When I looked out, there was nothing but darkness and the trees swaying in the wind. The next day, it got even worse. When I went out to grab something from the car, I could feel a figure hanging back behind the garage wall. I called the police, and when they showed up, they went around with their flashlights, checking the woods and the backyard. But they didn't find anything. One of them told me to stay calm and keep my phone on me, but the look in his eyes said he thought I was making it all up. I knew what I heard was real. Another night, after getting back from work, I heard footsteps crunching on dry leaves and this slow, heavy breathing. I didn't look back. I just bolted straight for the door. But once again, he was gone, like he was never there to begin with. I called my parents, and they told me to go crash at a friend's place until they got back. But stepping out right now felt like asking for trouble. I decided to stay home for the night and pack up so I could head to a friend's house first thing in the morning. As I got out of the car and went into the house, the fear from the past few days hit me all over again. Out of nowhere, someone rushed at me from behind. All I could make out were these cold eyes behind a mask. He yanked my arm hard, and I could feel his hot breath on my neck. Then I felt a sharp pain in my back, like something had stabbed me. In a total panic, I swung my bag as hard as I could and smashed it into his face. It threw him off just long enough for me to jump into the car and lock the doors. I slammed on the gas, my heart racing, so fast I thought it might explode. When I got to my friend's place, I called the police, and they showed up about 10 minutes later at both spots, my house and my friend's. They checked everything around both places, but didn't find a single trace of the guy. It was like he'd vanished into thin air, like he was never even there. For the next few days, I was on edge about everything. Every tiny noise made me jump. What kept me up at night, what wouldn't let me relax, was the one question I couldn't answer. Who was he, and why did he come after me? The fear and the constant feeling of being watched were, like a heavy weight I couldn't shake, in the days that followed. The police still didn't find a single trace of the guy, and all they could say was that maybe I imagined it all because of stress. But I knew what happened was real.
I kept hoping my parents would get back soon so I could stop living like this. But then they texted saying something came up at work and they couldn't come home as planned. I didn't have any other options, so I decided to go back home. That night, while I was in the kitchen, I heard footsteps coming from the attic. I grabbed a kitchen knife and slowly made my way up the stairs. Using my phone flashlight, I swept the attic with the beam. At first, everything looked normal until I saw a dirty mattress, empty food containers, and photos of me taken without me knowing. There were pictures of me at the gas station, on the drive home, and even in my bedroom. I turned around, and there he was. Before I could even react, he came charging at me. In a total panic, I swung the knife. He went down, breathing weakly, then just stopped. I bolted out of the house, called the police, and stood there crying, shaking, and scared out of my mind, with blood all over my hands. When the police got there, they found out he was a wanted criminal who'd been on the run for the past 3 months and had probably been hiding out in my house the whole time. It hit me. He'd been watching me this entire time. It was horrifying, and I completely broke down, sobbing. But what sent chills down my spine even more was when the police checked his phone. They found a video of him talking to my parents. In the video, my parents were standing there with him at the gas station, having a full-on conversation. At first, it looked like they were just talking to some random guy, but then my dad handed him a wad of cash and a map, and then my mom's voice came through, cold and sharp. "Here's the key. Get it done quickly and cleanly." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How could they do this? I started shaking, feeling like my whole world just fell apart. The police took all the evidence right away, but they wouldn't say anything about it yet. I begged them to dig deeper. A few days later, they uncovered something absolutely horrifying. My parents were drowning in debt. The guy they hired wasn't just some random criminal. He was a pro, a hitman who'd done cleanup jobs for cash. I wasn't just a random target. He came after me because I was their daughter. It felt like my parents saw me as nothing but a burden, and the life insurance money from me was their way out of debt. That truth cut deeper than anything. The people I trusted and loved the most had turned me into prey. The police started digging deeper into the case, but my parents were gone, just disappeared without a trace. I was left alone with an empty house and the kind of nightmare that sticks with me forever. When it all came out, it shattered me. It felt like every piece of my broken heart was slicing into my soul, leaving a pain I couldn't shake. I used to believe that no matter what, even if the whole world turned its back on me, my parents would always be my safe place. But they were the ones who threw me into hell. I kept asking myself, how could the people who gave me life be so heartless? I packed up whatever I could and walked away from that house, from my past. But the fear didn't go anywhere. Even in the middle of a crowded street in a city where nobody knows me, I still feel it. That invisible gaze, like someone is watching me, making every breath catch in my throat. Every night, I push a chair against the door and keep a knife under my pillow. I don't sleep to rest. I sleep to survive, stuck in a nightmare that never lets go.
I'm John, a senior student at the University of Chicago. I'm not the type of person who gets emotional easily. A life with little attention from a young age shaped me into a tough, independent person. But when the unexpected struck, it shattered everything I thought I knew about my own strength. No one could understand my pain when I found out that my grandmother, the only person I had in this world, had been murdered. My world, for more than 20 years, had only been my grandmother, ever since my early childhood. I had no idea who my father was. Many times I asked for information about him, but my grandmother would only look at me and shake her head. My mother, after leaving me with my grandmother, had no further involvement in my life. She was the one who raised me, taught me how to view life, understand love,
cultivate patience, and even learn the lessons of forgiveness. Every morning I would sit with her sipping coffee, listening to her stories about the past, the hardships she endured, and the tales of her first love. Especially about my mother. I understood that my grandmother always wanted me to be closer to her. After all, she was the one who gave birth to me. I also tried to create the bond that should have existed between a mother and her son. But the more I tried, the more my mother pushed me away. Anyway, even without my mother, I was doing just fine. Until one day. At that time, I moved into the dormitory due to the heavy class schedule in my senior year of college. Every day I would still call my grandmother, and those conversations became an essential part of my life. Her voice was always warm and full of love, as if the distance between us had never existed. She was the only person I could share everything with, from difficult exams to worries about the future. One evening, before going to bed, as usual, when I called, Grandma proudly mentioned that she would be visiting my mom's house the next day to play with Gypsy, my 15-year-old younger sister. That was also the last time I could call and hear her voice. At first, I thought she was just busy, but then days went by and I couldn't get in touch with her. Her messages became short and cold, unlike usual. She said she was fine, life was good, and she had left my mother's house to go to Aunt Alice's. I asked why she wasn't answering my calls, but she didn't respond. A feeling of unease began to spread, but I tried to convince myself that she was just busy. She often shared posts emphasizing that her current life was going really well. Why was she refusing to talk to me? Why had she become so strange? Wasn't it that every day she always wanted to hear me talk? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was being hidden from me. I called Aunt Alice and she said that Grandma had never gone there and that she was actually at my mother's house. I decided to call the police. For the first time in my life, I felt weak and helpless. The police went to my mother's house and Aunt Alice's house, but she never showed up. Aunt Alice insisted that she hadn't visited at all. My mother kept saying that she was at Aunt Alice's house, that she had come over last night and left in the afternoon, then went to the hospital for a checkup. But then, everything started to unravel slowly. As I sat in the interrogation room, the police began asking questions I had never even considered. They mentioned that my mother had referred to a debt I owed my grandmother, a debt I had never known about. According to my mother's account, I was a terrible and ungrateful person. While she never once reached out to check on me, she spoke as if she knew everything about my life. The feeling inside me at that moment was a mixture of emptiness and shock, overwhelming my senses. Although I didn't want to, I always had a feeling that my grandmother may have passed away, and my throat tightened, and I was terrified by my own thoughts. Finally, the police obtained permission from my mom's boyfriend and conducted a search of the house. In a plastic container in the storage room, they found the severely decomposed body of my grandmother. The police immediately arrested my mother and her boyfriend. After the interrogation, they quickly ruled out my mother's boyfriend as a suspect. And of course, there was only one person left who could be the perpetrator. In the face of accusations from the police suggesting that my mother did this to profit from insurance or social welfare policies, she adamantly denied everything. But her denials were completely unconvincing. I felt like the entire world around me was collapsing. My mother, the one who brought me into this world, turned out to be the heartless person who hid the body of her own mother just to profit. The story is based on a real case that occurred in Michigan. The story begins when the Michigan Police Department received a call from Carol, the daughter of Patricia Bennett, reporting that she hadn't been able to contact her mother for several days. Carol mentioned that Patricia was living with her sister, but she also brought up a conflict between Patricia and her son, John, regarding a debt. This raised suspicions for the police, as they had not yet asked about John, but Carol brought him up herself. The police continued to question Carol and grew suspicious that she was hiding the truth. They accused her of possibly hiding her mother's body if she had passed away in order to profit from insurance or Social Security benefits. Carol repeatedly denied the accusations and panicked, which only increased the suspicion surrounding her testimony. The police believe that Carol might be hiding the disappearance or death of her mother.
Can you open that?
She fit in here.
I mean, she's in there. Oh, she's in there.
I am Sarah, 34 years old, living with my husband Daniel in a small house in the suburbs of Portland, Oregon. We chose this place for its tranquility and open space, a place where the sound of the wind rustling through the trees and the chirping of birds each morning create a perfect picture of life. But what happened last week made me no longer feel safe in my own home. The story began on a Friday morning when the house next door welcomed a new couple. From my kitchen window, I saw them unloading their belongings from the car into the house. They didn't seem particularly remarkable. The woman wore a long dress, her hair partially covering her face, her skin pale. The man was tall and broad-shouldered. Both of them had an unusual demeanor, as if they were quietly observing everything around them. Suddenly, their eyes landed on me. I was startled and quickly looked away. Their presence unsettled me, but I brushed off the feeling. They were just tenants, probably introverted people. During the day, the couple remained private. I rarely saw them outside, and when they did, they moved quickly between the car and the house. But at night, everything started to change. Around 10 p.m., while Daniel and I were sitting on the sofa watching a comedy movie, a light from the neighbor's backyard caught my attention. I walked to the living room window and saw candles being lit, forming a perfect circle in the yard. The couple stood within that circle, heads bowed, holding small objects I couldn't make out from afar. I could hear the man's voice, low and continuous, like he was chanting an incantation. The air outside suddenly grew heavy. A chill ran down my spine, and I didn't know what to do. Daniel reassured me, saying they might be performing some kind of spiritual ritual. I had my suspicions about the couple and their ritual, but Daniel advised me not to dwell on it. They're not bothering anyone, so we should respect their privacy. I listened to my husband, returned to the sofa, but I could no longer focus on the movie. The next morning, after the second night, I woke up feeling strangely uneasy. The air in the house felt suffocating. Daniel was still fast asleep, but I couldn't stay in bed any longer. An inexplicable urge pushed me to step outside into the backyard. The early morning air sent a chill over my skin. The dim sunlight reflected off the dewy grass. My feet moved instinctively, scanning the yard. Then, near the fence, something shiny caught the sunlight. It was a silver necklace with an upside-down black pentagram pendant, engraved with strange symbols like ancient runes. I had never seen anything like it before. The moment I picked it up, an unnatural coldness crept up my spine. I stared at it, a deep sense of unease growing within me. Why was it here? I didn't tell Daniel, partly because I feared he would think I was overreacting, and partly because I didn't even understand what was happening myself. I hid the necklace in my desk drawer, trying to shake off the eerie feeling creeping over me. That night, exhaustion weighed on me in an unusual way, as if my energy had been drained. The moment I closed my eyes, I was pulled into a deep sleep, and then the dreams came. I saw myself standing in the backyard, surrounded by darkness. Candles flickered, forming a circle around me. The couple knelt across from me, their mouths moving in endless murmurs of incomprehensible sounds. The air in the dream was crushing. I wanted to move, to scream, but I couldn't. My legs felt nailed to the ground. My arms hung limply by my sides, my entire body frozen. I jolted awake, drenched in cold sweat. For a brief moment, I thought I could hear whispers from somewhere in the house. But then I turned, and my heart nearly stopped when I realized it was Daniel. He was sitting upright in bed, his eyes wide open, staring at something distant. His lips moved, murmuring strange, unintelligible words. I called his name, but he didn't respond. It was as if he wasn't in control of his own body. The next morning, I told Daniel what had happened, but he had no recollection of it at all. He simply laughed and reassured me that I was probably just stressed and imagining things. But for a split second, his eyes held something unfamiliar, both worry and a hint of something else, something hidden, just out of reach. One afternoon, while absent-mindedly glancing through the kitchen window, I saw the neighbor woman standing motionless in her backyard, eyes shut. In her hands, she held a silver necklace identical to the one I had found. Her lips murmured something soft, rhythmic, unsettling. So the necklace wasn't there by accident. It had been deliberately placed in our backyard as a summoning mark to pull me into their ritual. The couple wasn't just performing their ceremony in their own yard. The ritual was seeping into our lives, drawing us in unknowingly. Then came the final night. Footsteps echoed in our backyard. I bolted upright, yanked open the bedroom curtain, and my heart nearly stopped. The couple stood there, in the middle of a burning candle circle, the flickering light casting eerie shadows over their pale faces. They were staring straight at our window, but their eyes were completely white, blank, emotionless, just hollow, soulless voids, but somehow their gaze gripped me, held me captive. I heard the deep murmurs again, but this time, they weren't just sounds. I could feel the words sinking into my mind, creeping through my thoughts like unseen tendrils, forcing me to stare back. I reached for my phone to call the police in, but the moment I did, the lights in the yard went out. When we looked again, the couple was gone. An eerie silence filled the night. From that moment on, we couldn't sleep. The stillness of the night, the weight of dread, it consumed us. I felt weaker with each passing day, as if my energy was being drained every night. Strange bruises appeared on my arms and legs without explanation. Daniel began sleepwalking. I woke up one night to find him standing in the living room, whispering words I couldn't understand. When I called his name, he turned to look at me, with eyes that were no longer his. One morning, Daniel stepped outside to check the yard. He came back inside, face pale, holding a folded piece of paper. My hands trembled as I took it from him, unfolding it to read. The message was scrawled in black ink. "Thank you for participating." A cold dread settled deep into my bones. I felt as if something unseen had wrapped itself around us. Daniel's expression was one of sheer terror. We couldn't stay there any longer. We packed our things and left the house immediately. But just before we left, I opened the drawer to take another look at the necklace, and that's when I froze. Next to it lay an old, yellowed photograph. In the picture was a group of people dressed in black robes, standing in a circle, each of them wearing the exact same silver necklace. But what shocked me most was Daniel standing between them, right next to the neighboring couple, with a mysterious smile.
Thank you for watching until the end. As mentioned earlier, our goal of reaching 50,000 subscribers in 2026 is still ongoing. If you enjoy these stories, please give us a hand and support us.